The neon sign of Marco's Pizzeria flickered against the November rain, casting intermittent red shadows across the cracked sidewalk of Little Italy. Sofia Romano checked her phone for the third time in as many minutes. 11:47 p.m. 13 minutes until her shift ended. 13 minutes until she could finally go home, peel off her grease-stained uniform, and collapse into bed before her 6 a.m. anatomy class. At 23, Sophia had become an expert at running on empty. Between her pre-med studies at Northwestern, her late-night shifts at Marco's, and the constant juggling of student loans that seemed to multiply like rabbits, sleep had become a luxury she couldn't afford. But she was close, so close, to finishing her undergraduate degree. Just one more semester, and then medical school applications, and then, maybe finally, she could stop smelling like pepperoni and start building the life she'd dreamed about since she was a little girl, watching doctors save her grandmother's life. Sophia. Marco's gravelly voice cut through her thoughts. The old Italian man emerged from the kitchen, his weathered face creased with concern, flour dusting his thick black mustache. "I need you to do one more delivery. I know it's late, but—" "Marco, my shift ends in 12 minutes, Sophia protested, gesturing at the ancient wall clock that had been hanging crooked for as long as she'd worked there. "I have an exam tomorrow on the cardiovascular system. I need to review my notes before I crash." "I know, Bambina, I know." Marco wrung his hands. A gesture Sophia had learned meant he was about to ask for something he knew she didn't want to do. "But this is a special customer. Very important. He orders from us once a month, always the same thing, always at the same time. If we don't deliver, if we disappoint him—" Marco made a vague gesture that could have meant anything from "we'll lose business" to "we'll be sleeping with the fishes." Sophia pinched the bridge of her nose, feeling a headache forming behind her eyes. "How important are we talking?" "Vittorio Salvatore." Marco whispered the name like a prayer or a curse. "The address is on Lakeshore Drive, the penthouse. You take the service elevator, you give the pizza to whoever answers, you don't ask questions, you don't look around, you come straight back. Capiche?" Sophia's stomach dropped. She'd heard the name Vittorio Salvatore before. Everyone in Little Italy had. Whispered conversations that stopped when outsiders approached. News articles that danced around accusations without ever making direct claims. A family that had been in Chicago since the 1920s, with roots that ran deep into Sicily and businesses that were too varied, too successful, too conveniently immune from the usual scrutiny. "Marco, I don't think—" "Triple tip," Marco interrupted, pulling a crisp $100 bill from his pocket and pressing it into her hand. "This is just for taking it. Whatever he gives you at the door is yours to keep. I hear he's generous." Sophia stared at the money. $100. That was her grocery budget for 2 weeks. That was the difference between making her rent on time or having to call her mother in Boston and endure another lecture about giving up this foolish medical school dream and coming home to work in her uncle's restaurant. "Fine," she heard herself say, "but this is the last time, Marco. I mean it. Of course, of course. Last time." Marco was already hurrying back to the kitchen, relief evident in his shuffling gait. "The order's ready. Large margarita, extra basil, light on the sauce. Very specific, this man." 5 minutes later, Sophia was in her beat-up Honda Civic, the pizza warming the passenger seat, driving through Chicago's rain-slicked streets toward the part of town where she definitely didn't belong. The buildings grew taller, cleaner, more intimidating with each block. She passed doormen in uniforms that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe, restaurants where the entrees started at 3 figures, jewelry stores that didn't bother displaying prices because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. The address Marco had given her led to a building that made her Civic look like it should be in a museum, a classic example of poverty next to opulence. The Regency Tower stretched 50 stories into the Chicago night, all glass and steel and understated elegance that screamed old money. Sophia pulled up to the service entrance as instructed, where a security guard with shoulders like a linebacker and a face like a granite cliff stepped out of a small booth. "Delivery for the penthouse," Sophia said through her cracked window, trying to sound more confident than she felt. The guard studied her with eyes that had seen too much and trusted too little. He checked a clipboard, then nodded curtly. "Take the service elevator to the top floor. You'll be met there. Don't deviate from the route." The garage smelled like expensive cars and air freshener trying to mask the scent of old concrete. Sophia parked in a visitor spot and grabbed the pizza, which had stayed miraculously warm in its insulated bag. The service elevator was tucked in a corner, industrial and utilitarian compared to the marble and gold she could glimpse through glass doors leading to the main lobby. As the elevator climbed, Sophia found herself rehearsing what she'd say. "Here's your pizza, sir. Have a good evening." Simple, professional, no eye contact, no questions. In and out in 30 seconds. The elevator dinged softly. Even the service elevator in this building was quieter than the main one in her apartment complex, and opened onto a small hallway with a single door at the end. Before Sophia could even step out, the door swung open and a woman emerged. She was probably in her mid-40s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal pantsuit, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun, and eyes that assessed Sophia in approximately 2 seconds and found her wanting. "You're late," the woman said in crisp, unaccented English. "Mr. Salvatore does not appreciate tardiness." "I'm sorry, the rain." "Follow me." The woman didn't wait for Sophia to finish, turning on heels that clicked sharply against marble floors. Sophia stepped into the penthouse and tried not to gape. She'd thought her imagination had prepared her, but reality was something else entirely. The entryway alone was larger than her entire apartment. Original artwork hung on walls painted in rich, warm tones. A chandelier that looked like it belonged in a palace cast soft light over furniture that was clearly antique and probably worth more than Sophia would make in her entire lifetime. "Wait here," the woman instructed, gesturing to a spot near the door. "Do not touch anything. Do not move from this location." Sophia nodded, clutching the pizza bag like a shield. Through an archway, she could see into what appeared to be a dining room where several men in expensive suits sat around a table covered in papers and laptops. Their voices were low, serious, discussing things that made Sophia's Italian heritage suddenly feel like a liability. She didn't want to hear anything, didn't want to see anything, just wanted to deliver the pizza and go home. "Chia," a voice from deeper in the apartment, rich and authoritative, speaking Italian with a Sicilian accent that made the words sound like music and threat simultaneously. "La consegna della pizza, signore," the woman in the pantsuit replied. "Bring her in." Sophia's heart hammered against her ribs. That wasn't part of the plan. Marco had said give it to whoever answers the door. He hadn't said anything about going further into the apartment, about being summoned like, "Now," the woman said, her tone leaving no room for argument. Sophia followed her through the archway, past the dining room where the men had stopped talking to watch her pass, and into a living space that defied description. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked Lake Michigan, the water dark and turbulent under the storm. A fireplace carved from what looked like a single piece of marble dominated one wall. And standing with his back to her, silhouetted against the windows, was a man who commanded the space simply by existing in it. Vittorio Salvatore turned, and Sophia forgot how to breathe. He was probably in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered in a way that suggested power carefully contained. His suit was black, perfectly tailored, with a crisp white shirt open at the collar. Dark hair was styled back from a face that belonged in Renaissance paintings, all strong lines and sharp angles, with eyes so dark they looked black in the firelight. There was a scar along his left jawline, faint but visible, that somehow made him more striking rather than less. But it was his eyes that held her frozen. They were studying her with an intensity that made Sofia feel like he could see through her pizza-stained uniform, through her careful walls, straight down to the scared girl who was terrified she'd never be good enough, never be smart enough, never escape the limitations of her background. "You're not the usual delivery person," Vittorio said in English, his accent adding an edge to each word. "No, sir. Johnny called in sick. I'm covering his route." Sofia forced the words out, keeping her gaze somewhere around his shoulder. "Your pizza. Large margarita, extra basil, light on the sauce." She held out the bag, desperate for him to take it so she could leave. But Vittorio didn't move. Instead, he tilted his head slightly like a predator examining something unexpected. "Look at me." It wasn't a request. Sofia's eyes snapped to his despite every instinct screaming at her to keep them down. "What's your name?" "Sofia. Sofia Romano." "Sir." "Romano." He repeated her last name like he was tasting it. "Sicilian?" "My grandparents were from Palermo, but I was born here, in Boston. I moved to Chicago for school." Why was she telling him this? Marco had said, "Don't volunteer information, don't engage in conversation." "What are you studying?" "Sofia Romano from Boston." "Pre-med. I'm hoping to get into medical school next year." The words came out before she could stop them, carried on a wave of pride she couldn't quite suppress despite her exhaustion and fear. Something shifted in Vittorio's expression, not quite a smile, but a softening around the edges. "A doctor. Ambitious." "Someone has to fix the people who make stupid decisions," Sofia said, then immediately wanted to crawl into a hole and die. Had she really just said that? To Vittorio Salvatore? In his penthouse? While holding his pizza? But instead of anger, Vittorio laughed. A genuine sound that transformed his entire face. "Indeed. Though I've found that people rarely learn from being fixed." He finally took the pizza bag from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for a moment. Even through her exhaustion, Sofia felt the contact like an electric shock. "Carlo!" Vittorio called, and one of the men from the dining room appeared instantly. "Pay the young lady. Include a generous tip for driving through this storm." Carlo pulled out a wallet thick with bills and counted out $300. Sofia stared at the money like it might bite her. That was more than she made in a week at Marco's. "Sir, that's too much." "I decide what's too much," Vittorio interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. "You drove through dangerous weather to bring me dinner at midnight. You deserve compensation." Sofia took the money with shaking hands, tucking it carefully into her jacket pocket. "Thank you, sir. I should go now. Early class tomorrow." She turned to leave, but Vittorio's voice stopped her. "Sofia." She looked back. He was watching her with that same intense focus, like he was memorizing every detail. "Drive carefully. Chicago streets are dangerous at night, especially for young women alone." There was something in his tone. Concern? Warning? Sofia couldn't tell. She nodded and let the pantsuit woman escort her back to the service elevator. Only when the doors closed and she was descending did she let out the breath she'd been holding. What the hell had just happened? The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of lectures, lab work, and late-night deliveries. Sofia tried to forget about Vittorio Salvatore, about his dark eyes and the way he'd said her name like it meant something. She had exams to study for, bills to pay, a future to build that had no room for dangerous men in penthouse apartments. But then it was the last Friday of November, and Marco was wringing his hands again. "Sofia, I need you to—" "No." She didn't even let him finish. "Marco, I told you. That was a one-time thing. Please, Bambina. He specifically requested you, called the restaurant himself, asked for the young woman who delivered last time." Marco's eyes were wide with something between awe and terror. When Vittorio Salvatore requests something, we don't say no. Sofia's stomach flipped. He'd asked for her? Specifically? Why would he do that? Marco shrugged helplessly. Who knows why men like that do anything? Maybe he liked your face. Maybe he needs a doctor someday. Maybe... Marco stopped himself, as if realizing he was about to say something dangerous. Just take him his pizza, Sofia. Same as before. In and out. Nothing complicated. But as Sofia drove toward Lakeshore Drive again, pizza warming the passenger seat, she knew that nothing about Vittorio Salvatore was uncomplicated. This time, the security guard waved her through without checking his clipboard. This time, when she reached the penthouse, the severe woman wasn't waiting. Instead, the door was opened by a different man, younger, maybe mid-20s, with kind eyes and a gentle smile. Sofia Romano? He asked in Italian. Yes. Mr. Salvatore is expecting you. Please, follow me. The penthouse looked different without the storm outside. Moonlight streamed through the windows, painting everything in silver. The young man led her not to the living room but to a different space, a library with walls of books that reached the ceiling, leather furniture arranged around a desk where Vittorio sat reading something on a tablet. He looked up when she entered, and Sofia saw surprise flicker across his face, as if he hadn't quite believed she'd come. He stood, setting the tablet aside, and Sofia noticed he wasn't wearing a suit this time. Just dark slacks and a black sweater that somehow made him look more dangerous rather than less casual. Sofia, thank you for coming. His voice was warm, lacking the sharp edge from their first meeting. I brought your pizza, sir. Same order. I know. Vittorio gestured to the desk, where an envelope sat next to a crystal tumbler of what looked like expensive scotch. Your payment. However, I should confess something. Sofia's hand went to her pocket where her car keys sat, calculating how quickly she could run if necessary. Sir? I don't actually want the pizza tonight. Vittorio's lips curved into something that might have been embarrassment on anyone else. I wanted to see you again, to apologize. Apologize? For what? For my behavior during your last visit. I was intense, interrogative. You came to deliver food, not to be questioned like a suspect. He moved around the desk, maintaining a respectful distance. My associates informed me after you left that I probably frightened you. That's not something I'm accustomed to feeling regret about. But I did. I do. Sofia didn't know what to say. This wasn't the script. Vittorio Salvatore, the man whose name made Marco turn pale, whose reputation preceded him like a dark cloud, was apologizing to her? A broke college student who smelled like pizza dough? You didn't frighten me, she lied. Vittorio's eyebrow arched, and his smile widened slightly. Now you're lying, which means you're kind as well as ambitious. A dangerous combination. I should go, Sofia said, even as part of her wanted to stay, to understand this man who made no sense. If you don't want the pizza, keep it. Consider it payment for your time. Vittorio picked up the envelope and crossed to her, holding it out. And this is for the inconvenience of calling you here under false pretenses. Sofia took the envelope, feeling the thickness of bills inside. Mr. Salvatore. Vittorio. Please. Vittorio, she corrected, the name strange on her tongue. Why did you really ask me here? He was quiet for a moment, studying her face like he was deciding how much truth to tell. Because in 32 years I've met thousands of people. I can read them within minutes, their motivations, their weaknesses, what they want and what they fear. It's a necessary skill in my line of work. And I couldn't read you. You stood in my home, exhausted and probably terrified, and yet you looked me in the eye and made a joke about people making stupid decisions. You took money you clearly needed but looked like it hurt your pride. You rushed to leave, but I could see curiosity in your eyes, fighting with common sense. Vittorio took a step closer, and Sofia could smell his cologne, something expensive and subtle that made her head spin. You're a puzzle, Sofia Romano, and I've always been terrible at walking away from puzzles unsolved. I'm not a puzzle, Sofia managed, trying to ignore how fast her heart was beating. I'm just a girl trying to get through school without drowning in debt. There's nothing mysterious about that. Then why are you still standing here? Vittorio asked softly. You could have left already, could have taken your payment and run, but you're still here, asking me questions, trying to understand me as much as I'm trying to understand you. He was right, damn him. Sofia should leave, should take her money and her pizza and go back to her safe, predictable life of lectures and late-night cramming. Being curious about Vittorio Salvatore was like being curious about a beautiful snake, fascinating right until it bit you. I have an exam Monday, she said, which wasn't an answer to his question. Then I won't keep you. Vittorio stepped back, creating distance, and Sofia felt something like disappointment curl in her stomach. But perhaps you'll deliver again next month. I find I've grown fond of Marco's pizza. Sofia nodded, not trusting her voice, and turned to leave. She made it to the library door before his voice stopped her again. Sofia? She looked back. Your exam Monday. Cardiovascular system? At her surprised nod, Vittorio smiled, a real smile that made him look younger, less dangerous. Remember that the heart is both the strongest and most vulnerable organ. It keeps us alive, but it's also what kills us in the end. There's a metaphor in there somewhere. Sofia left the penthouse with more questions than answers, her pocket heavy with money she probably shouldn't keep, and the taste of his name on her tongue like something forbidden. She didn't know it yet, but that night had started a countdown. 30 days until everything changed. 30 days until Vittorio Salvatore would have to make an impossible choice. 30 days until midnight. The Monday exam went better than Sofia expected, possibly because she kept hearing Vittorio's voice explaining the heart's dichotomy, and it helped her remember the key concepts. She told herself that was the only reason she'd been thinking about him. Not because of his eyes, or his smile, or the way he'd apologized like it actually mattered to him that he'd frightened her. She managed to go 5 whole days without thinking about him for more than 10 minutes at a time. A personal record. On Thursday, Sofia was in the middle of her shift at Marco's when a delivery order came in that made the old man's hands shake as he wrote down the address. No, Sofia said immediately, seeing where this was going. He asked for you specifically. Marco, it's Thursday. He orders on Fridays. And he admitted last time he didn't even want the pizza. I'm not doing this. Sofia, please. No. She untied her apron and grabbed her backpack. I have to study anyway. Roberto can handle deliveries tonight. She made it out to her car before her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She should have ignored it, should have driven home and buried herself in her immunology textbook and forgotten that Vittorio Salvatore existed. She answered on the 4th ring. You're avoiding me. His voice was amused, warm, with an undercurrent of something that might have been hurt. How did you get my number? I own half of Little Italy, Sofia. Getting a phone number is perhaps the least impressive thing I'm capable of. A pause. You're angry. I'm not angry. I'm busy. I have a life that doesn't revolve around delivering pizza to men who don't actually want pizza. Fair point. She could hear him moving, the clink of ice in glass. Have dinner with me. Sofia almost dropped her phone. What? Dinner. A proper meal. Not delivered through my service entrance. There's a restaurant in River North. Quiet. Excellent food. We could talk. Talk about what? Whatever you'd like. Your studies, your dreams, why you chose medicine. Why you're working yourself to exhaustion instead of accepting help from your family. Before Sofia could ask how he knew about that, Vittorio continued. Or we could sit in silence and eat excellent pasta. I'm flexible. I can't have dinner with you. Can't or won't. Sofia leaned against her car, staring up at the Chicago sky where the first stars were appearing through the light pollution. You're Vittorio Salvatore. I'm a broke college student who smells like marinara sauce. We exist in completely different worlds. Worlds intersect more often than you'd think. His voice softened. Sofia, I'm not asking you to marry me. I'm asking you to share a meal, to give me a chance to be something other than the name that makes your boss shake. Why me? The question burst out of her, raw and honest. You could have dinner with anyone. Models, lawyers, women who actually fit into your world. Why are you calling a girl who delivered your pizza? Vittorio was quiet for so long that Sofia thought he might have hung up. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight she hadn't heard before. Because everyone in my world wants something from me. Power, money, protection, status. You looked at me like I was just another customer. Do you have any idea how rare that is? How exhausting it becomes? Always calculating everyone's angle? Maybe I want something too, Sofia challenged. Maybe I'm just better at hiding it. Then have dinner with me and tell me what it is. I'll give it to you if I can. At least that would be honest. Sofia closed her eyes, knowing she was about to make a terrible decision. When? Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock. I'll send a car. No car. I'll drive myself. She wasn't about to lose her escape route. Then I'll text you the address. Dress casually. It's not that kind of restaurant. He paused, and Sofia could hear the smile in his voice. Thank you, Sofia. I haven't said yes yet. You answered the phone. The rest was inevitable. He hung up before she could argue, leaving Sofia staring at her phone and wondering what the hell she'd just agreed to. The restaurant was called Nonna's, tucked on a side street that Sofia would have walked past a dozen times without noticing. No sign outside, just a simple door with a small plaque. But when Sofia pushed it open at 7:15, she'd sat in her car for 15 minutes, debating whether to actually go in. She found herself in a space that felt like stepping into someone's Italian grandmother's dining room. There were only 8 tables, each covered in red and white checkered cloth. The walls were lined with photographs, black and white images of Sicily, of old Chicago, of families gathered around tables laden with food. The air smelled like garlic and fresh bread, and the kind of cooking that took hours of love. Vittorio sat at a corner table, his back to the wall, a habit Sofia recognized from movies, from stories whispered about men who always needed to see the exits. He was wearing jeans, actual jeans, and a dark blue Henley that made his eyes look less black and more like deep coffee. He stood when he saw her, and Sofia felt ridiculously self-conscious in her simple black dress and denim jacket. You came, he said, and the relief in his voice was genuine. You said the food was good. I'm a starving student. Of course I came. Sofia slid into the chair across from him, noting that he'd chosen a table where she also had a clear view of the door. A small kindness, letting her feel safe. The food is exceptional, Vittorio assured her. Mama Rosa has been cooking here for 40 years. Everything is made from her grandmother's recipes. He poured water from a carafe into her glass, the gesture oddly domestic. She doesn't have a menu. You tell her what you're hungry for, and she makes it. As if summoned by her name, an elderly woman emerged from the kitchen. She was tiny, barely 5 feet tall, with silver hair in a bun and eyes that sparkled with mischief. She said something in rapid Sicilian that made Vittorio laugh, then turned those sharp eyes on Sofia. So this is the girl, Mama Rosa said in Italian, but a dialect that was closer to Sofia's grandparents' speech than the standardized Italian she'd learned in school. The one who makes you smile at your phone like a fool. Mama. Vittorio's ears actually turned slightly red. Pretty, Mama Rosa declared, reaching out to pat Sofia's cheek with a flour-dusted hand. Good bones. Strong eyes. Sicilian? My grandparents were from Palermo, Sofia managed. Palermo, a good city, though not as good as Trapani, where I'm from. Mama Rosa winked. You eat meat? Fish? What does your heart want tonight? Sofia blinked at the phrasing. I haven't eaten fish in a while? Then you'll have my branzino. Vittorio, you want the usual? Please, Mama. The old woman patted Sofia's cheek again, muttered something that sounded approving in Sicilian, and bustled back to the kitchen. She's intense, Sofia said. She knew my grandmother, used to cook for her family gatherings in Sicily before they both came to America. Vittorio's expression softened. She's one of the few people who knew me before I became this. He gestured vaguely at himself. Before you became what? Rich? Powerful? Mysterious? Before I became the Salvatore heir. Before I learned that everyone wants something. That trust is currency. That showing weakness is inviting attack. Vittorio leaned back in his chair, studying her. Do you know what it's like to inherit a legacy you didn't choose? To wake up one day and realize that the life you thought you'd have is gone, replaced by obligations and expectations? Sofia thought about her own family, about the restaurant empire her uncle had built in Boston, about how he'd expected her to join the business and acted like her desire to study medicine was a personal betrayal. Maybe more than you think. Tell me. So Sofia did. She told him about growing up in Boston's North End, about her grandmother's illness and the doctors who'd saved her life, about deciding at 12 years old that she wanted to do that for other people, about her mother's tears when Sofia had announced she was moving to Chicago for college, about her uncle's anger, about feeling like she was disappointing everyone by choosing her own path. They think I'm being selfish, Sofia said, surprised by how easy it was to talk to him. That I should stay in Boston, marry some nice Italian boy from the neighborhood, work in the family business. But every time I think about giving up medicine, I feel like I'm dying inside. Then you don't give it up, Vittorio said simply. You fight for what you want, and you let them be angry. Eventually, they'll understand or they won't. But at least you'll have lived your life instead of the one they chose for you. Is that what you did? Vittorio's smile was bitter. No. I did what was expected of me. I became what I was born to be. And most days, I don't regret it. But sometimes. He trailed off as Mama Rosa returned with their first course. A simple salad of fennel and orange that was so perfectly dressed, Sofia wanted to cry. They ate in comfortable silence for a moment before Vittorio continued. Sometimes I wonder who I would have been if I'd been brave enough to choose differently, if I'd become a teacher, like I wanted when I was young, or a chef, or just someone normal, with normal problems. You wanted to be a teacher? Sofia couldn't hide her surprise. History, Vittorio confirmed. I loved stories about ancient Rome, about how empires rose and fell. My tutor used to say I had a gift for making the past come alive. His expression turned self-deprecating. Now I make different kinds of history. Less noble, perhaps. I don't know about that, Sofia said carefully. Marco speaks about you with respect. People in Little Italy seem to genuinely admire you, not just fear you. Respect built on fear isn't real respect, it's just survival instinct. Vittorio set down his fork, his dark eyes locked on hers. I want you to respect me, Sofia. Not the name, not the power. Me. Is that possible? The question hung between them. Vulnerable and honest in a way that Sofia suspected Vittorio rarely allowed himself to be. She thought about lying, about giving him the easy answer. But something in his expression made her want to be equally honest. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "Ask me again after I've gotten to know you better." Vittorio's smile was like sunrise, slow and warm and transformative. "Then I'll have to ensure there are many more dinners." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of incredible food and conversation that ranged from medical ethics to Italian cinema to heated debate about whether Chicago or New York had better pizza. Sofia argued for New York. Vittorio defended Chicago. Neither convinced the other, but both enjoyed the argument. Mama Rosa brought course after course. The branzino that made Sofia moan with pleasure. Homemade pasta with a sauce that Mama Rosa claimed had been passed down for 6 generations. Cannoli that were somehow crispy and creamy at once. When they finally left the restaurant at nearly 11, Sofia's stomach was full, and her cheeks hurt from smiling. Vittorio walked her to her car, his hands tucked in his pockets like he was resisting the urge to reach for her. "Thank you," Sofia said when they reached her beat-up Honda. "For dinner. For listening. For being not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone scarier. Someone who'd try to impress me with money or power. Someone less real." Vittorio stepped closer, and Sofia's breath caught. He reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered against her cheek for just a moment. "I'm very real, Sofia. And I'm very interested in seeing you again. Not as your customer. As someone who'd like to know what else makes you smile besides perfectly dressed fennel salad. I have finals coming up." "After finals, then? Or before, if you need a study break. Or during, if you want someone to quiz you on anatomical terms." His smile was playful. "I'm flexible." Sofia knew she should say no, knew that whatever this was between them, it couldn't end well. They were from different worlds, with different futures, and letting herself get attached to Vittorio Salvatore was like setting herself up for heartbreak. But when she opened her mouth, what came out was, "I have a study session at the library Sunday afternoon. If you happen to show up with coffee around 3, I wouldn't complain." "Then I'll see you Sunday at 3, Vittorio promised. "With the best coffee Chicago has to offer." He waited until she was in her car, engine running, before he stepped back. Sofia drove away, checking her rearview mirror more times than was safe, watching him stand under the streetlight until she turned the corner. She made it 3 blocks before she started grinning like an idiot. Sunday came too slowly and too fast simultaneously. Sofia changed her outfit 4 times before settling on jeans and her Northwestern sweatshirt. The message being, I didn't try too hard, even though she absolutely had. She arrived at the library at 2:30, spread her notes across her favorite table by the window, and pretended she wasn't watching the door. At exactly 3 o'clock, Vittorio walked in carrying 2 cups from a coffee shop Sofia had never heard of. He was wearing dark jeans and a black sweater, his hair slightly messy like he'd been running his hands through it. He looked unfairly good for someone who'd probably slept on silk sheets while Sofia had been up until 2 a.m. cramming information about renal function into her exhausted brain. "1 vanilla latte with an extra shot," Vittorio said, setting the cup in front of her. "The barista assured me it's what stressed students survive on." "You asked a barista what stressed students drink?" Sofia couldn't help but smile. "I asked 3 different baristas, actually. Got 3 different answers. Went with the one who looked most exhausted. Figured she'd know from personal experience." Vittorio settled into the chair across from her, cradling his own coffee. "What are we studying?" "Renal system. It's fascinating, but there's so much to memorize. Nephron structure, filtration rates, hormone regulation." "Teach it to me." Sofia blinked. "What?" "I've found the best way to learn something is to teach it to someone else. Explain the renal system to me like I'm 5 years old. Make it simple. Make it stick." Vittorio leaned forward, genuinely interested. Plus, I'd like to know what has you spending your Sunday in the library instead of doing something fun. So Sofia taught Vittorio Salvatore about kidneys. She drew diagrams on scratch paper, used her coffee cup to demonstrate filtration, got so animated explaining the loop of Henley that she knocked over her pen cup. And Vittorio listened like she was explaining the secrets of the universe, asking questions that showed he was actually paying attention, making jokes that helped her relax. Other students glanced at them occasionally. Vittorio was hard to miss. And the intensity with which he focused on Sofia made more than one girl shoot her envious looks. But Sofia found she didn't care. For the first time in months, studying didn't feel like drowning. It felt like sharing something she loved with someone who genuinely wanted to understand. They stayed until the library closed at 8, moving from renal function to cardiovascular to endocrine systems. Vittorio bought them sandwiches from the campus cafeteria that he gamely ate despite probably being used to Michelin star restaurants. When they finally packed up Sofia's notes, she realized she'd learned more in 5 hours with Vittorio than she had in 2 weeks of solo studying. "Thank you," she said as they walked out into the cold November night. "That actually helped a lot. Then we should do it again. Make it a standing date. Sunday afternoons, I bring coffee. You explain to me how the human body works." Vittorio stopped walking, turning to face her. "Unless you'd rather I didn't keep showing up in your life." Sofia should say yes, should thank him for his time, and gently extract herself before this became something she couldn't walk away from. But looking at him in the lamplight, at the hope and vulnerability in his expression, she found she didn't want to walk away. "Same time next week?" she heard herself say. Vittorio's smile could have powered the entire campus. "It's a date." He walked her to her car again, waited until she was safely inside, raised his hand in farewell as she drove away. And Sofia realized with a flutter of panic and excitement that somewhere between delivering pizza and debating about kidneys, she'd started falling for Vittorio Salvatore. She was so screwed. 3 weeks later, everything changed. Sofia was leaving the library when 2 men in dark suits approached her. They weren't threatening, just insistent. "Mr. Salvatore needs to see you. It's urgent." Her heart hammered as they drove her to the penthouse. Something was wrong. Vittorio never sent men to find her. He always called first, always asked permission. When she entered his apartment, Vittorio stood by those floor-to-ceiling windows, tension radiating from every line of his body. An older man sat in one of the leather chairs, silver-haired, expensively dressed, with eyes like chips of ice. "Sofia." Vittorio turned, and the anguish in his face made her stomach drop. "This is my uncle, Giovanni Salvatore, head of our family." Giovanni studied her with the assessment of someone appraising merchandise. "So this is the girl who's made my nephew forget his obligations. What's going on?" Sofia looked between them. "Sit down, both of you." Giovanni's voice held absolute authority. 3 months ago, Vittorio, you agreed to an arrangement with the Castellano family. A marriage to unite our organizations, to end 20 years of territorial disputes." Sofia's blood went cold. "Marriage?" "I never agreed," Vittorio said tightly. "You and the other families decided. I said I'd consider it. And while you considered, you've been courting a pizza delivery girl." Giovanni's tone made it sound like an insult. "The Castellanos found out. They're insulted. They want the wedding to proceed immediately, or they'll consider our treaty void." "Then let it be void. And start a war that will destroy everything our family built? That will get good men killed?" Giovanni stood, his presence filling the room. "You have a choice, Vittorio. Marry Isabella Castellano by midnight on December 31st, or watch this city burn." Sofia felt like she couldn't breathe. "Why midnight?" "Tradition," Giovanni said coldly. A marriage sealed at the turn of the new year is considered blessed, sacred, unbreakable. He looked at Sophia with something almost like pity. You seem like a nice girl, but you're not part of this world. You can't understand what's at stake. Then explain it to me, Sophia challenged, finding her voice. Power, legacy. The lives of hundreds of people who depend on the stability our alliance provides. Giovanni moved toward the door. Vittorio has until midnight, December 31st, 6 weeks from tonight. Choose wisely, nephew. When they were alone, Sophia turned to Vittorio. Were you ever going to tell me? I was trying to find a way out. He reached for her, but she stepped back. Sophia, please. You let me fall for you knowing you were supposed to marry someone else? I fell for you too. The words exploded from him. I never expected you. Never expected to meet someone who saw me instead of my name, who challenged me, who made me want to be better. You think this doesn't tear me apart? Sophia's eyes burned with unshed tears. What are you going to do? I don't know. Vittorio looked shattered. If I refuse, people die. If I agree? He couldn't finish. Then you agree, Sophia whispered. You marry her. You do what you have to do. And lose you. You never really had me, Vittorio. We were just pretending we could exist in the same world. She grabbed her coat, needing to escape before she broke completely. Don't call me. Don't come find me. Just live the life you were meant to live. She ran before he could stop her, before her resolve crumbled. The next 6 weeks were torture. Sophia threw herself into finals, into work, into anything that kept her from thinking about Vittorio. She changed her delivery route, avoided Little Italy, tried to forget the way he'd looked at her, the sound of his laugh, the feeling of being truly seen for the first time in her life. On December 30th, Marco found her in the kitchen. Sophia, someone here to see you. It wasn't Vittorio. It was the severe woman from the penthouse, holding an envelope. From Mr. Salvatore, she said simply. Inside was a letter in his handwriting. Sophia, I've spent 6 weeks trying to do the right thing, trying to be the man my family needs me to be. Tomorrow at midnight, I'm supposed to marry Isabella Castellano and secure peace for everyone who depends on me. But I can't do it. I can't marry her when I'm in love with you. My uncle was wrong. You do understand this world better than any of us. You understand sacrifice. You understand choosing duty over desire. You've been doing it your whole life, working yourself to exhaustion to achieve your dreams without asking anyone for help. But I'm not as strong as you. I can't sacrifice you. I can't live a life where I wake up every day knowing I chose obligation over the only person who ever made me feel truly alive. I've found another way. It required negotiations, compromises, some of my territory, most of my influence, a complete restructuring of family power. But the treaty will hold without the marriage. People will be safe. I won't be the Salvatore heir anymore. I'll be just Vittorio, a man with fewer resources, less power, uncertain prospects. A man who wants to go back to school, maybe teach history, maybe open a small restaurant. A man who has no right to ask you to take a chance on him. But I'm asking anyway. If you feel even a fraction of what I feel for you, meet me at Nana's tomorrow night. Not at midnight. I'm done with dramatic deadlines. Just come at 7. We'll have dinner. We'll talk. And maybe, if I'm very lucky, we'll start building something real. All my love. Vittorio Sofia stood outside Nonna's at 7 p.m. on New Year's Eve, her heart pounding. Through the window, she could see Vittorio at their usual table. He wasn't wearing an expensive suit, just jeans and a sweater. He looked nervous, hopeful, human. She pushed open the door. He stood when he saw her, and the joy that flooded his face was worth every risk. You came, he breathed. You gave up everything, Sofia said. Not everything. I still have what matters. He reached for her hand. A chance to be who I choose to be. A chance to earn respect instead of demanding it. A chance to love someone extraordinary. His thumb brushed across her knuckles. If she'll have me. Sofia thought about all the reasons this was crazy, all the ways it could go wrong. But she also thought about his letter, about the courage it took to choose love over legacy, about how maybe they'd both been looking for permission to live authentically. I'll have you, she whispered, but I'm keeping my dreams. Medical school, my career. I wouldn't want you any other way. Vittorio pulled her close. We'll figure it out together. All of it. When midnight came, they were sitting at Nonna's table, hands intertwined, planning a future that belonged only to them. No deadlines, no obligations, just two people who'd chosen each other over everything else. Outside, fireworks exploded over Chicago, celebrating the new year. Inside, Sofia and Vittorio were already home. The end.